I walked into my son's backyard that afternoon, holding a basket of lemon muffins still warm from the oven. The air smelled of cut grass and charcoal. It reminded me of summers long past, when little David would run barefoot through this same yard, laughing as he chased butterflies. My knees ached, but I didn't mind. I was 75, and every step felt like a small victory. I wanted to surprise him, to see my boy, his wife Marissa, and my granddaughter Lily. I hadn't been invited, but I thought that didn't matter. Family never needed invitations. Or so I believed. As I rounded the hedge, I heard voices coming from the patio. I smiled when I heard David's deep tone, but then I stopped. Why is she even still alive? It was Marissa's voice, sharp as broken glass. I froze, hidden behind the lilac bush. My heart stumbled in my chest. David sighed. Marissa, don't start this again. I'm serious, she snapped. She's old, she's sick, and she's sitting on a house we could sell for $500,000. We're drowning in debt while she's baking muffins and wasting time in that dusty place. My breath caught in my throat. Surely he would defend me, his mother who raised him alone, who never took a cent for herself. Surely he would tell her to stop. But then he said softly, I know. I've been thinking the same thing. Maybe it's time we look into that care facility near Maple Street. For a moment the world tilted. My vision blurred, and I had to grip the garden gate to steady myself. Marissa laughed, a cold, brittle sound. Good. Once she's out, we can sell the house and pay off the loan. She won't even notice, she forgets things all the time. I'll talk to her, David said, his voice suddenly distant, almost guilty. We'll make it sound like it's for her safety. I could almost hear my heart breaking in that quiet space between their words. Safety. That was the word he chose to hide betrayal. They talked a little longer. Numbers, plans, my belongings reduced to lines on a paper. And I listened, numb and trembling. I wanted to walk in there, to shout. I heard everything. But something stopped me. Maybe pride. Maybe pain too deep to speak. When I finally turned to leave, the basket slipped from my hand. Muffins scattered across the grass like tiny golden suns, broken and crumbling, just like me. I walked away slowly, each step heavier than the last. My cane sank into the earth, and tears blurred the path ahead. But I didn't turn back. As I reached the sidewalk, I glanced at the sky. The same sky that had watched me raise that boy alone after his father died. I remembered sewing his clothes by candlelight, skipping meals so he could eat, selling my wedding ring to pay for his college. And this is how he repaid me. With whispered plans and cold calculations. I stopped in front of a rosebush at the edge of the yard. My roses, the ones I'd planted the day David was born. Their petals had begun to wilt, their color fading. Yet they stood tall, stubbornly alive. I touched one gently, and a thorn pricked my finger. Blood welled, a single red drop. Don't worry, my loves, I whispered to the roses. I'm still alive, and they'll learn what that means. For the first time in years, a strange calm filled me, not peace but purpose. If my son and his wife wanted me gone, I would give them exactly what they asked for, just not in the way they expected. I straightened my back, wiped the tears from my face, and whispered to the wind, You'll regret wishing me dead, David. I promise you that. And with that, I left the garden where my heart had shattered. And where my revenge had just begun. The next morning, sunlight spilled through my kitchen window, soft and golden, touching the framed photos on the wall. Each one was a memory. A younger me holding baby David, his gap-toothed grin on his first day of school, his graduation photo, me clapping in the audience with tears in my eyes. Now each picture felt like a lie, a fragile mask hiding years of devotion that ended in betrayal. I sat at the table, my hands wrapped around a cup of tea that had long gone cold. My reflection in the tea's surface looked unfamiliar. Tired eyes, trembling lips. A woman who had given her whole life away and received nothing but silence in return. My mind wandered back to the beginning, to the little apartment where David and I first lived after his father, Richard, passed. I was only 27 then, a widow with no savings and a child who asked every night, When's Daddy coming home? I'd hold him close, whispering stories until his tears dried. I worked days at the laundry and nights cleaning offices, sometimes collapsing from exhaustion, but never from despair. My boy was my strength. I remembered saving every penny to buy him a second-hand bicycle. His joy that morning had lit up the whole neighborhood. "You're the best mom ever," he shouted, riding in circles. Back then, I believed love was enough to build a life. But love, I would learn, can be fragile when greed grows beside it. When David met Marissa, I was genuinely happy. She was charming, ambitious, and came from a wealthier family. I thought she'd bring color into his life. But I noticed, over time, how her sweetness only bloomed in front of others, never for me. She'd correct me at dinners, roll her eyes when I forgot small things, and always remind David, "Your mother means well, but she's old-fashioned." It began slowly. David visited less. He stopped asking for advice. My gifts sat unopened. My calls went unanswered for days. When I did visit, Marissa would smile too tightly and say, "Oh, Evelyn, we're so busy these days. You understand." Yes, I understood. I understood perfectly. Still, I told myself it was just life moving on. I wanted to believe my son was still my little boy, the one who brought me daisies on Mother's Day. But that illusion shattered yesterday with 6 cruel words. Why is she even still alive? I touched my chest. The pain there wasn't physical. It was deeper, quieter, like a thread pulling apart inside me. But something else began to grow in that broken space, a spark of clarity. I realized that all my life, I'd been giving without ever protecting. I taught David compassion but never boundaries. I raised him with love, not wisdom. And now, I saw the truth. The boy I loved was gone, replaced by a man molded by greed and a woman's ambition. I stood slowly, straightening my shoulders. My knees cracked in protest, but I ignored them. I walked to the cabinet where I kept my old documents, insurance papers, property deeds, savings accounts. My late husband, bless his foresight, had left us a few investments, which I had quietly nurtured over the years. David didn't know about them. Neither did Marissa. I traced the edge of a folder labeled Collins and Company, the firm my husband once trusted. Mr. Collins was still alive, old as me, but sharper than ever. Maybe it was time for a visit. A plan began to whisper in my mind, soft as the rustle of leaves outside. I wouldn't confront them. Not yet. No, revenge wasn't always about shouting or slamming doors. Sometimes, the sweetest justice came wrapped in silence and patience. I looked again at the photos on the wall, the echoes of the past staring back at me. "You taught me love, Richard," I murmured to my late husband's picture. "But it's time I teach our son a lesson he'll never forget." Outside, the roses swayed gently in the breeze, their thorns gleaming under the sun. I smiled faintly. "Let them think I'm weak," I whispered. "They'll soon learn how strong an old woman's heart can be." 2 weeks after that afternoon in the backyard, I put on my thick wool shawl and caught the morning bus into town. The autumn wind was sharp, and my fingers ached around the handle of my purse. But inside me burned something that kept me warm, resolve. The other passengers saw only a frail old woman on her way to the pharmacy or church. None of them knew I carried the quiet beginnings of revenge folded neatly between old bank documents and a will. Mr. Collins' office was the same as it had been for decades. A modest room with the smell of leather, dust, and strong coffee. He looked up when I entered, his wrinkled face breaking into a kind smile. "Evelyn Grace," he said, standing to shake my hand. "Still sharp as ever, I see." I smiled. "Maybe sharper than I've let people believe." We sat down, and I told him everything. The overheard conversation. The house. The betrayal. Every word was heavy, but saying it aloud lifted something off my chest. When I finished, he leaned back thoughtful. "I'm sorry, Evelyn. But you know, this might be your chance to set things right. You've worked too hard to have it all taken from you." I nodded. "I'm not after revenge for the sake of cruelty. I just want to protect what matters, and make sure the right person inherits it." And so, for the next hour, we began crafting the roots of my plan. First, we discussed the assets David didn't know existed. 3 small properties in my late husband's name, the life insurance payout I'd never used, and the trust I'd quietly built for Lily, my granddaughter. She was only 17, but she still visited me every Sunday, bringing flowers and stories from school. Her kindness was genuine, untouched by her parents' greed. She was my one bright spot in a dimming world. Mr. Collins helped me draw up a new will. Everything, my house, my savings, the hidden properties, would go to Lily. Nothing to David or Marissa. I even arranged for my house's ownership to be quietly transferred to Lily's name upon my departure. Then came the final touch. I wrote a letter, sealed in an envelope to be opened only when I was gone. In it, I recorded my voice and words, explaining the reasons behind every decision. Not out of bitterness, but truth. I wanted David to hear my voice one last time, calm and unbroken, telling him what he had lost through his own choices. When all was signed and witnessed, I left the office feeling lighter than I had in years. The air outside smelled of rain and smoke, and the clouds hung low, like secrets waiting to fall. A few days later, I called David. "Sweetheart," I said softly, playing the part of the frail, forgetful mother. "You were right. Maybe it's time I move somewhere with more help. I've found a nice nursing home near the park." He sounded almost relieved. "That's great, Mom. Marissa and I were just saying you'd be happier around people your age." "Of course," I replied gently. "You can take care of the house and everything else." "Don't worry, Mom," he said. "We'll handle it all." I hung up with a smile he couldn't hear. Oh yes, he would handle it all. Just not the way he imagined. Within the week, I packed my belongings and moved into the nursing home. The nurses were kind, and the walls smelled of lavender. I played cards with the other residents, laughed at their stories and waited. In that quiet place, surrounded by the slow rhythm of ticking clocks and whispered prayers, my revenge grew. Quietly, beautifully, like a garden in the dark. Every night, before bed, I wrote in my journal, documenting everything for Lily. One line always ended the page. Some betrayals don't need shouting. Sometimes silence is the loudest justice. I smiled at that thought and closed my eyes. My son believed he'd won, that I'd faded into weakness and forgetfulness. But I hadn't forgotten a thing. I was just waiting for my flowers to bloom. It was a quiet morning when my time finally came. The world outside my nursing home window was painted in soft gold. The trees shedding their last leaves of autumn. I had just finished writing a letter to Lily the night before, sealing it with trembling hands and a steady heart. I felt no fear, only peace. I had lived long enough to learn that death wasn't the end. Sometimes, it was simply the final stroke of a story carefully written. When the nurse found me, I was smiling, the morning light touching my face. They said it looked as if I'd fallen asleep mid-dream. Perhaps I had. A week later, my family gathered for the reading of my will. I wasn't there, of course, but I could almost imagine their faces. The greedy anticipation in David's eyes, the smug satisfaction in Marissa's. They must have thought they'd finally won, that their patience had paid off. Mr. Collins sat at the head of the polished oak table, his silver glasses glinting under the light. Lily sat beside him, her eyes red from tears but her posture firm, a quiet strength radiating from her that reminded him of me. He began reading. To my beloved granddaughter, Lily Grace. David's expression changed instantly. Marissa's hand, resting on his, stiffened. I leave my house at 412 Rosewood Avenue, including all its contents, the garden and the deed. I also leave to her the entirety of my savings, investments, and properties registered under the Grace Family Trust. David leaned forward, his voice sharp. What about us? There must be something. She wouldn't leave us with nothing. Mr. Collins raised an eyebrow. There is something. A message. He pressed a small button on a recorder beside the papers. My voice filled the room, soft, calm, but unyielding. Hello, David. If you're hearing this, I've already gone. I hope you remember the last time I baked muffins and walked into your yard. I heard you, you know. Why is she even still alive? Those words cut deeper than you'll ever understand. But I forgive you. Forgiveness, however, does not mean forgetting. David's face paled. You took my love for weakness. You thought age made me blind, but it gave me time to see everything clearly. I raised you with my hands, fed you with my sacrifices, and trusted you with my heart. And yet, you sold them both for comfort. Lily clutched the letter I'd left her, tears slipping silently down her cheeks. So my son, I'm leaving you something too. Time to think, time to feel, time to realize that wealth without love is poverty of the soul. I hope one day, You teach your daughter what I taught you before you forgot. The recorder clicked off. Silence filled the room. Marissa rose, her face red with anger. This is ridiculous. You can't do this, David. You're her only child. Mr. Collins folded the papers neatly. Legally she could. And she did. Lily stood then, her voice trembling but strong. Grandma wanted peace. You both gave her pain. This house, her money, it's not yours to claim. She trusted me to protect it, and I will. David said nothing. His gaze was fixed on the table, jaw tight, eyes wet. Later that day, Lily walked through my old house. The air smelled faintly of lavender and dust. Outside, the garden was in full bloom, as if it had waited for her. Roses of every color stretched toward the sunlight. On one of the garden stones, freshly polished by Mr. Collins's instruction, was a single engraved line. You wished me gone. Now live with what remains. Lily knelt before it, tracing the letters with her fingers. A small smile curved her lips through her tears. You did it, Grandma, she whispered. You made them remember. As the wind moved through the garden, petals drifted across the path like whispered forgiveness. In the house behind her, David stood in the doorway, staring at the garden that once bloomed under my hands. He reached out to touch a rose but flinched when a thorn pricked his skin. Some lessons, I thought, wherever I was, had to draw a little blood to be remembered. And so, in the end, my garden bloomed again, watered not by sorrow, but by truth. My revenge had not destroyed, it had restored. Because even in betrayal, love had the final word.